How do types evolve? One way is to ask people from the community of seekers who are not necessarily people who can tell about the great journey. The other is to ask those people who seem to have come to the top or to the end of the journey, who are the greatest historical representatives of the different types. And even if they're not alive and we cannot really interview them, maybe their biographies can tell us what we want to know about how they have evolved. So, what I am proposing is, since we are a group of people who is available to do some collective research, let's take 27 people who are very high exemplars and study those 27 lives. Divide the task of studying those lives. So what I want to convey to people who are going to participate is use your creativity when you read. Try to understand what could have done it. Some of the great beings that are documented were artists, and then we can say, it would be easy to say they followed the way of art. Art brought them to deeper awareness. What about art? It's the expression of their human suffering, desire for knowledge that art also contains, just as science. Is it that the process of artistic creation requires activating one's own depth, looking deeply into one's experience, and that is stimulating? Or is it that art involves inspiration, and that is something like contact with an angelic level of existence? So that's a big question. One question is, what is the difference between a mature being and one who hasn't evolved? And the other is, how did they get there? For instance, Gandhi probably increased the word Mahatma means great soul. Maybe his soul got bigger through his mission, through dedication to his inspiration. And in his case, it's very easy to demonstrate that. When he was studying law in England, he was so shy that he couldn't present himself to exams. Or at least the first time he presented himself, he was so nervous that he couldn't pass. When he was at the height of his career, he was invited by Queen Victoria to come to England, and he came with his half-naked dress and sat next to Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria asked him, "What do you think of civilization?" Do you know his response? No. "I think it would be a very good idea." He overcame he was preservation 6. He became courageous. And he became courageous beginning with a certain day in his life. He had been sent for a job to Africa, and he was in a train, and there was no place in train for blacks. That train was for white people. And he was not black, but he was not the right color anyhow. And he resisted injustice until he had to be beaten and thrown out of the car, out of the train. And then he became dedicated to changes in justice in Africa. And his way of doing so was very unprotected. he exposed himself to bullets. He stimulated people to do demonstrations, and he went with them, not fearing the bullets, out of a conviction that the truth would win and sacrifice was worth it. I suggest that as you read, you underline what the writer says about the character of the person whose life is written. If I'm reading a book about Balzac, there is an excellent Stefan Zweig book about Balzac. And if I find that it says that he suffered very much, but he did not complain, but he was always smiling and generous in his attitude to people, well, I would say that's remarkable, I underline it. But not only is it useful to underline descriptors, traits, but also scenes, to mark when the author of a novel or a historical biography, when the author shows interactions of the character with other people. So, 27 types were probably very different types of stories. I ask you to underline, mark scenes which the theater people may use in that part of the workshop, but use your mind to understand these lives. What did they do to evolve? And what developed in them that made them remarkable? We will have a team of theater people. We will combine hearing about the lives. It would be too dry, too academic to just share information about 27 different people. It would be a kind of intoxication of words. It's so very interesting, but too much of the same would be tiring. So we'll combine hearing about these lives and embodying these lives in a dramatic way. My idea of it took form as we did the Balzac. If we have 9 groups, according to the 9 characters, and in each group we will have 3 kinds of person. They are very different subtypes. Well, the more you know them, the more different they become. If you have to act your type and one other subtypes, you will probably find that it's very easy to act oneself. If I'm a social 2, probably I can do a good job of pretending to be Goethe for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That's what people do in the cinema with casting. They find the right actor for the right character in it. But if I am the rather rigid, social, self-important 2, and I want to be a childlike 2, that's not so easy. It's artistically not so successful, but therapeutically very interesting. It reveals my rigidity, it reveals my conditioning, my need to be in a certain way. If a social 4 wants to be a sexual 4, probably she will have to practice a lot of screaming and use the body differently. Very taboo. But also for a sexual 4, it's taboo to be shameful. It's taboo to be weak. It's easier to take and to demand than to desire and ask. So that's the idea, to have everybody an opportunity to act himself through a big character. Also some opportunity to be a different subtype. And that is really a challenge to not be one like oneself.